Hello, everybody. A little bit late on this, but this next review will be on another Solzhenitsyn book, Alexander Solzhenitsyn, um, that I'm gonna do. It's called Cancer Ward, and I'm not gonna lie, like a good deal of Russian literature that I started out with. It's been a few years. It's been like 5 or 6 years since I've read this, but I did look over it, just to kind of grasp a little bit more on what happened in the book because the plot kind of escaped me a little bit. But it is fiction, but I would say it's like I don't know if you called it like Roman eclef, where there's elements of uh, definitely elements of Solzhenitsyn's own life imbued, kind of that he draws from, and very much like a day in life of Ivan Denisovich. His Russian names, man. He does a similar technique where it's very much what could have been, you know. And this draws a lot from Solzhenitsyn's own. It was published in 1966, but it's actually set in like the mid 50s when Solzhenitsyn, you know, if I were to give a if I were to give an adequate background, it would basically take me like 20 minutes, and I think I might have done that in the last video. Um, but Solzhenitsyn was born in 1918, I believe. It's confusing me with another one of his books, which is called August 1914, but he was born in 1918, and that was right after the Russian Revolution, which plays a big role in kind of the canvas of his life. And he was very much a started out as very much a student of the arts, like a very like, even though I don't know if he was technically educated, I think he actually ended up joining the army and becoming a great kind of patriotic, zealous type of maybe jingoist is not the right word, but kind of for the Russian army, the Red Army in World War II. And he was a tank commander, I think. And one of his poems, Prussian Nights, actually details the kind of atrocities that he himself partook in, and he meditated a lot on that in the Gulag Archipelago, and says like, were we any better, like on those on when we were shooting out, missiles and basically plundering these. I think that's where it comes from, Prussian Knights, because he was, they were invading these. Um, I guess at the time it wasn't Germany, right? It was just a collection of disparate states and stuff like Bavaria and this and that, and um, Weimar was, it was still, I think, technically Weimar Republic. I'm not sure. Might have been reinstated, but yeah, it was definitely. The fact was is that Solzhenitsyn was very tormented over this, and in a stoical type of way, he kind of meditated on these actions that he did, and um, and I guess in another sense, it was kind of karmic for him. And so yeah, going back to Cancer Ward, this takes a slice out of his life from a chapter when he was diagnosed with cancer, and basically he was, to make a long story short, Solzhenitsyn was basically thrown in the gulag for basically a really petty type of thing, like as most people were. I mean, he details again in the Gulag Archipelago that there's a young girl that accidentally, breaks, pushes over the, excuse me for my squeaky chair, accidentally breaks a bust of Stalin, and she's thrown in the gulags too. So it's basically just any, it's just it's a total totalitarian way overcorrection of like what was, the czarist Russia before. It's like, Dostoevsky. I mean, he spent like, yeah, that was awful for him to have been singled out, and him and the Petrovsky Circle and all that to be political exiles, and to be thrown into Siberia for I think it was about 7 years. But like I think, with the Solzhenitsyn, it was 8 years of just grueling labor, and then when he was sick, it was basically like there was no refuge from this awful, because torment, because he was thrown in this hospital. And if I was surprised to see that the hospital that this was based off of, I think in somewhere in Uzbekistan, was actually this very small stony building. It wasn't anything. It was so like backwards, and there's a lot of and he's supposed to be getting treated for cancer. This is a very serious, health issue. It's not just something that you just like, oh, it's just a minor little head cold or something. But this place was just, it was a setback at least 80. Apologies for that. My phone recording turned off partway through, but I was in the middle of talking about the state of disrepair that in Solzhenitsyn's hospital, and there was a lot of comparisons that I got that I've heard other people make for this to The Magic Mountain by Thomas Mann, primarily in I think the manner in which the book unfolds, where there's a lot of health issues, and that I should review that pretty soon too. But it takes place at a hospital. That takes place at a sanatorium actually, and then the main character Aleksandr is basically shows up there for expecting only for something paltry and somewhat insignificant, and then he ends up forming these relationships with all these other people, and it's kind of a coming of age type of thing where he's a younger guy, and he starts off being kind of not incurious, but definitely not the most imaginative person around, and then he ends up kind of being teased by all these other people into being really questioning, very critical, and not in a bad way, but just very analytical and observant. So basically it's like that in the sense that there's these characters, and the main character is Oleg Kostologov, I think it's Kostoglatov, and he's primary character, again, draws from Solzhenitsyn's own life. I'm guessing he's maybe in his 30s, and he's not at a particular high point in his life. He's thrust in the situation, this awful service and technology and pharmaceutical, just totally in disarray. And he's also a geologist there too. There's also different walks of life, and in classic type of maybe in the vein of Dostoevsky too, although people have called Solzhenitsyn a little bit too morally simplistic, and some people say that he was a mediocre writer, but I'll talk about that more later. The main thing, though, is that he does convey grand ideals with, of Russia, kind of through the lens of these characters. So they act as these, not entirely stand-ins, but there's, one man who is a former type of KGB officer, and he's like, oh, why am I stuck in this, this crap hole? I should be, I should be on palaced floors, and I should be, working for the great, he's very bitter. He's just this awful person. And then there's another guy, I think he's a geologist, and then there's a few different love interests he has, well, two. One is Vera, and she's a bit older, a little bit past her prime, kind of and they both share that with Kostolnikov. He's the main character, and he falls for her in a kind of a more platonic way. They have plenty of conversations, and she cares for him, and she's quite intelligent too, and she's seen a lot too, like him. And this is contrasted with this younger kind of I almost want to be tempted to call it puppy love or something for this other girl named Zoya, and she's a young nurse, and she's kind of this hot shot, very popular, very, especially with the men, and she's, and she's not a bad person per se, but she's just kind of I don't know, naive, or she's just impressionable maybe, but she's not all that she's cracked up to be. And then I think Kostolnikov, he kind of realizes this, and he's yeah, she's kind of a bit more, she's got a long way to go, and they're just coming from totally different places, and in that sense, Vera might not have the looks that Zoya does, but she has the wisdom and kind of the life experiences, accrued over the years. So yeah, there's a lot of that kind of dynamic going on, and there was a funny part where all of them were desperately trying to find this kind of magic cure-all thing for cancer, and they were yeah, we don't want to be in here getting or tumors removed, and by these in this dark age area. Like we like and because of that they were seeking these kind of curable, like, oh, we heard of this little route out in that I think you had to travel across, to Siberia or somewhere. It sounded like really risky and questionable, but like they were all getting, and the main character wasn't getting Oleg wasn't getting I think he wasn't buying into this, judging from the way he kind of reacted to it. But like all these other kind of other people just desperate to find a cure, and that's kind of I just thought that was kind of funny because you kind of see that today too, like the snake oil salesman type of thing, where a lot of people just fall for BS type of cures, and or whether that or if it's in like the kind of televangelist type prosperity gospel type thing that preaches you, oh, if you just say a few magic words, and if you just like do X, Y, and Z and buy this, then you'll be good, or you'll be healthy, and equating like spiritual health with physical health. So Solzhenitsyn, yeah, he's not to give too much of this novel away, because I think it's definitely something that has to be experienced and felt. Kostolikov basically finds himself in remission. The final act of the novel, he's basically finally cured of cancer, or at least that's what his doctor says, and it's which is surprising, I think, because I think there's points where it like hints that he might end up dead because of how long he's been in there, not unlike Solzhenitsyn's own experience. And so there's near the end of the novel, he's given a job, like he's trying to find a way out. The big thing here is that this is like near the end of his stay as a he's done his time basically, for not only that for his treatment, but he's basically a political prisoner. Like no longer is he like he's done his day, he's served his time, and now he's ready to go home. And he's there's not a lot of opportunities. It's like scarce out. The political climate, it's still in the thaw. Like I think like it's not even, I think this is right when Stalin dies. He died in like what, 53, 54, and that was only the beginning of the beginning of the end, I think, with Beria obviously was gotten rid of. He was assassinated, and kind of the movie Death of Stalin does a very kind of comical job of showing how that happened, with like this awful, not awful, but kind of a very sporadic way that he was rushed into it and basically assassinated mob style. But there's a lot of ways to go before Russia is kind of de-thawed, or is healed from its wounds. And he uses a lot of metaphors too, like Oleg near the end, he walks in a zoo and he sees that a monkey has been blinded by tobacco that somebody just throws chewing tobacco in this monkey's eyes, and he's blinded from it. And that's basically this metaphor for how the state, the grand state, the Soviet Union has kind of mistreated and just so much justice and against their own citizens, just to blind them for no other reason than just to kind of exercise control and shock them, and he's basically saying that's no way to kind of heal a wound, is to throw, is to basically exacerbate it. That's no way. So that's, after a world war and 2 world wars, that is, and so many millions of lives lost, and then just to do that to your own country, just to lead them into this, there is a lot of bitterness there, and you can understand that. And Oleg near the end of the novel, totally at a loss of what to do, and then because there's a quote from it that I can't quite remember, but it was something that Solzhenitsyn puts it quite beautifully, in my opinion, that the Gulag, like the labor camps, twisted his ability to think logically. Like they marred him so much. They browbeat him like to such an extent that he wasn't able to actually reason. Like he was like, oh, yeah, I'm gonna kind of join up with my, my friend's business as, like, I have a contact that I can join up with, I think, to get work or something, but it's not, who knows how it will pan out, but, like, his reasoning for where he's gonna go and what he's gonna do is, he's just like, I don't even know, because it's just, like, I've spent my lifetime has been totally abnormal, so how the heck am I supposed to even begin to think about doing that? So, I thought that was quite, insightful. So it's near the end of the novel. Oleg is actually is planning for a bit, at first at least, that to meet with Vera, and to kind of, she offers her home, and he can kind of see down the line that, oh, this could lead to a love affair. Like, he could actually be, they could be united once, for once and for all, if he wishes. And he sees that type of future, but then he realizes that, like, or, he knew from the get-go that, he's impotent, basically, from, all the treatment and remissions, and all that's basically caused him to just not be able to have kids. So he sees that future, and he's like a shell, of, like, he's no libido, there's no nothing, and he's just, like, completely at a loss of what to do, and he just, like, sends a pretty beautiful letter, that, part of it, where he says, "You may disagree, but I have a prediction to make. Even before you drift into the indifference of old age, you will come to bless this day, the day that you did not commit yourself to share my life. Now that I am going away, I can tell you quite frankly, even when we were having the most intellectual conversations, I honestly thought and believed everything I said. I still wanted all the time, to pick you up and kiss you on the lips. So try to work that out. And now, without your permission, I kiss them." So that's his last letter to her. He basically doesn't visit, he just, like, slips it under the door and goes on his way. He's a kind of a drifter at this point, and that's all I can remember from the novel. I'm probably missing out chunks there, but I might do, like, a re-review down the line, just to tack another thing on there. But people have criticized the book. Segueing into this next spot, people have criticized it for being too, like, just mediocre, for being too morally patronizing, hortatory, I guess is the word. But I don't think that way. Maybe it was just that I was younger when I read it, that I didn't pick up on these things, and I was just like, oh, this is kind of new to me. But I mean, there have been people also that who've made a good point of trying to make clear that Solzhenitsyn's anti-Semitism, or kind of alleged anti-Semitism, which I don't know if I want to get into the weeds with, but I will say that a lot of the people were saying, oh, it's so awful, like, his anti-Semitism just runs through everything, and it's just like, oh. And I think it's I think it's a bit too much jumping conclusions. I mean, it's kind of trying to put things into perspective when you realize that Solzhenitsyn, coming from the point of view as an Orthodox Christian, and he converted in the gulags, he wasn't, it wasn't coming from a place of vitriol or hatred and trying to vilifying the Jews. It was, like, I think, really just one point in all the Gulag Archipelago. Now, this was the abridged version, but it was still a good 500 pages, and I only sensed, and again, I read the Gulag Archipelago around the time of Cancer Ward, so it's a little, coming back to me in threads, but he only said that something along the lines of the Jewish Bolsheviks started, like, they were responsible, that, or, like, most of the Bolsheviks were Zionist Jews, or something like that, the great majority of them. And when you've been, browbeaten, when you've been subjugated into this oppressive regime for so long, it's, I'm not trying to give him any voice or any validity to act, to be, like, who knows, maybe he was violently anti-Semitic to the point of just being like, that in privacy, but, like, I don't think, it's like, people have echoed that, Dostoevsky having anti-Semitism, but I think it's something that we are too quick to kind of just be like, oh, one or two letters of these authors that have done, and they'll always put it in relation to the Orthodox Christianity, the Orthodox Russian variety of his belief system, and people will be so quick to just point that out and be like, he said X, Y, and Z about Jews, and it wasn't in this way that was like, Kanye, saying like the majority of people and blah blah, or happen to be of business owners and happen to be super, happen to have Jewish last names or something. It's not even. It wasn't that. It was a measured type of. Yeah, it just so happened that the Zionists at the time, 1917, when the Russian Revolution started with, Lenin coming back out of exile. Now, I'm rusty on this whole thing, and Trotsky was kind of the more reasonable one, as I remember. He wanted a permanent revolution that wasn't, the kind of Marxism that that Lenin was all in for. So there's kind of this dichotomy between people's beliefs, and it's some, like some of my favorite, I think one of my favorite authors ever, Jewish. There's great philosophers and mystics of the Jewish, Martin Buber, Kafka, off the top of my head, Ezra Pound is a great poet, and I think it's just people set aside when they say beliefs that cause them to act in a certain way. So this I think maybe Solzhenitsyn did harbor some, maybe, but I mean, I don't think we should redact his Nobel Prize. I mean, I think he pretty much deserved that, if not for penning really sly, samizdat type things like all these other kind of Soviet type people, and that other people mentioned that, like, oh, you should read this or that, Soviet type of literature around the time. That's a much better take on this, on the Stalinist regime and all that. I think that even though it wasn't his writing, his style is kind of a bit out there, a bit hard to pin down, and maybe it's not it's a little bit too prosaic, maybe, the way he describes it. It must be said that it's because it goes back to the actual man himself, the fact that Solzhenitsyn, like, he didn't get to spend healthy times in exile like Lenin. He didn't get to spend, even Dostoevsky. I mean, when he was exiled, he took long walks around the courtyard, and, there were times when House of the Dead that he, explains that at most he would have had to have carried like this lug of stones, I think, across his courtyard, or, to a stone quarry back and forth. Like, I forget the distance, but it wasn't to the extent that Solzhenitsyn suffered. And I'm not trying to say that exonerates everything. Obviously, we should just look things into context, I think, is just an important thing. So, yeah, like I said, his writing wasn't concise, and he didn't get to form like this modernist thing, because he never got a chance to become a great writer in the sense that Tolstoy or Dostoevsky or Nabokov were, because they spent their lives, in the not the intelligentsia, but like more so time to develop the skills and to continue writing. And there's a long gap between, so yeah, that was a very rambling, lots of ums. I'm sorry about that. I'm trying to fix that. It's just kind of a placeholder thing that I do when I'm thinking, it's probably not going to change in the future. I keep saying, like, sorry, I'm going to do, but yeah, I just did it, see. So, I hope to do more Solzhenitsyn. August 1914 is another one. Gulag Archipelago is more of a kind of a cohesive history on his stay, and, on all those, horrible years. So I definitely want to look into that, but yeah, more reviews coming. Hopefully more concise and to the point than this one. So thank you for watching.